Claressa Shields, this is an interesting talking point, I believe. Claressa Shields, obviously, she's one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant female boxer that we've seen. And she's making the transition over to mixed martial arts. She's training at Jackson Winklejohn's Academy in Albuquerque. I've seen video of her kicking pads. Didn't look good. Didn't look good, to be fair, but she's a beginner. Yeah, no, it's great. John Jones, all of them. But Harrington, you put it in the notes. Go on, Lewis.
What's her name? Who beat Ronda Rousey?
Holly Holm.
Yeah, Holly Holm also trained there, correct?
Yeah.
So they've already taken world championship boxer and turned them into a world championship mixed martial artist.
Yep, true. But Harrington, give us the specifics of the talking point that we're about to get into, unless Lewis wants to interrupt again.
Yeah, so Claressa Shields just made the point, she's making the crossover into MMA, and she says that MMA is what's going to make her a multi-millionaire because there just isn't the money for those purses in women's boxing. So despite the fact that she's arguably the best that sport has right now, she just can't make that money without stepping into the octagon. Yeah,
exactly. And it's an interesting point because she's right, and the sad reality is, and again, Lewis, I'm not having a go here. It's just relevant to the conversation that we're having. I'm not being a male chauvinistic pig and saying women can't drive, right. But it's supply and demand generally in all sports. Remember the US soccer team. They were saying the same thing, saying we weren't paying the same as men. And obviously she's saying that boxers, male boxers make tremendous money when you reach the top of the food chain and the women don't. That's again because there isn't this big thirst for female boxing. But if you look at mixed martial arts, it started with Strikeforce and the UFC came afterwards as well. They've done a tremendous job of implementing women into combat sports and the mixed martial arts. And now, some of the biggest, look at Ronda Rousey. She was one of the biggest stars the company ever saw. She's up there, top 3, Conor, Brock, Ronda, whichever order you want to put them in. So the money is there. And also with the structure that they have in the UFC, I don't know if I'm getting this 100% accurate, but it's something like once you win the belt, I think it's $500,000 plus you get pay-per-view points. And you look at Amanda Nunes. She's a huge draw. If you put her on any kind of card with a Conor McGregor or a Kamaru Usman, it's going to do big business. So while she is correct, it's not there in boxing. It's not because boxing are being male chauvinistic. It's not because they're being sexist. It's just because the demand isn't there. But in mixed martial arts, the way that it's progressed and it's evolved and the talent that the ladies have shown, there is those opportunities there.
I think across the board and probably most female sports, the demand isn't there. And that's not a knock on female sports. I'm not being a male chauvinist. It's just a fact. You look at WNBA, you look at female soccer, you look at boxing. There's just not as much of a general interest. And to be honest with you, it's male sports fans, right? So for the most part, I would say a vast majority of people that are buying tickets for these games and buying merchandise and spending money on sports are men. And I think men have a difficult time idolizing a woman or looking at a woman that way, the same way they look at a man. And I think with mixed martial arts, there's a couple X factors. Number one, it's the most dynamic sport in the world. You're taking, there's so many ways you could win. And the women now look as good as a lot of the guys in a lot of cases. And then also you have these mixed cards as well, because you remember in the beginning, they weren't putting females headlining cards. It was always headlined by male fights. And then something flopped. A few people broke through and it was just I think it was us being exposed to it and us going like, oh shit, no, some of these female fighters are more exciting than the male fighters. Maybe that's the answer for boxing. Maybe they should start mixing up cards, doing female and male events. I don't know. But there's probably a few different reasons for that because the UFC and mixed martial arts is the only sport where it seems to be the case.
Yeah, well, you can't deny the fighting spirit that the ladies have. They're certainly on par with the men. So you see some real good wars in the UFC, or in mixed martial arts from the ladies. And I'm sure, to your point, you would see the same thing in boxing. And and I think you're right, mixing the events up. And I'm sure they do that already. I'm sure they don't just stick to one gender for the events, but maybe that's what they need to do. They need to highlight some of the female talent on those big cards, give them a spotlight and give them a following. But the problem is for ladies, and again, you got to tiptoe around this, but the reality is for consumers of sports, generally in most events, let's say basketball or soccer, they just don't have the athletic ability. One of the most amazing things about watching basketball, certainly if you're there live, is watching these gigantic men jumping through the air, slamming balls. If they're playing soccer, it's just at a higher force. They can kick a ball much harder, further, stronger. They're just bigger, stronger, more athletic people. That's just the reality. When you put them against one another, though, in a cage, and there's no ball involved, that's all diminished.
Skill set.
It's against one another, and you see very, very competitive fights. And when you're watching a fight, and if it's going to be fight of the night, that it's got to be competitive. And the ladies, they certainly bring. They are such a valued addition to the UFC. So for Claressa Shields coming over, I get it, I understand, but I just think it's an interesting observation because what we're seeing right now. You've got women coming to MMA because they want to make big money. Well, boxers like Claressa Shields coming to MMA. But then you've got male fighters going to boxing because they want those big paydays. Because in boxing, you do have those stratospherical kind of paydays. You know what I mean? Apparently, Khabib turned down 100 million. Conor raised over 100 million. You know, I don't know what Tyron Woodley's gonna get, but he's saying, you know, the biggest payday of his career. It's just interesting to see some of the retired fighters shifting to boxing, but you got very much in their prime ladies coming to mixed martial arts.